Hey, what's up everyone? So far so good with our chat application. We have completed the authentication part of it. We can be able to register users, login users, and also log them out to the system. Now that we have some users to work with, it's time now that we start diving deeper into our chat application, where we will be able to create chats, get the chats, be able to send messages, and so on. So we are now have gotten to the good parts. Okay, I know these are the parts where most of you have been waiting for. So to begin with, in this particular episode, we are going to create some API endpoints to work with our chats. And this is what I mean. So for example, when we click on a user here, we will be creating a chat. So we need an API endpoint to create a chat. So right here, we will have an API endpoint which will enable us to create chat. And then once we create a chat, we will need another API endpoint to get the chats for a specific user. Okay, so we will need another API endpoint which will enable us to get the chats, and we will list those chats right here. Okay, so right here we will have an API endpoint to get the chats. Okay, and then another thing is that once we get the charts and we click on a certain chart, we will be setting that chart to state and be able to open it right here and see its messages. So we will be creating another API endpoint which will enable us here to find a specific chart. So we will be able to find chart. So we are creating three endpoints in this particular episode. One to create a chart, the other one to get all the charts for a certain user, and then the other one to find a specific chart, set it to state, and that way we will be able to open it here and get the messages. So let's just dive right in. So now on my VS Code, I'll go to the server, and then we will go to the models, and let's create a new file. Now here we will have our chat model, and let's import Mongoose. Just like that, we will create a chat schema. So right here you'll say const chat schema will be equal to new mongoose, and then dot schema. Right here we shape our document, and we will only have an array of members. Okay, so right here we will select members be an array. So we will only be having two members, that is like the sender and the receiver, only two. And then we will also be having a timestamp. So after this object, let's add a timestamp. I'll set these to true. And that's like it. So every chart we will only be having two members, and then we will use now this chart schema to create a chart model. So right here we will say const chart model will be equal to mongoose, and then dot model, and we say here chart, then here chart schema, and then right here we can export our model. So module dot exports chart model. So we will be using the chart ID and the sender ID to create a message. So later on we will be having another model for our messages. Now that we have our model, we can jump into controllers and we will create a chat controller. So right now we only have user controller. So let's add a new file and we will say chat controller Node.js. As we have said before, we will be creating 3 API endpoints. So we will be having an API endpoint to create chat. We will be having another one to get all chats, get all chats for a certain user, okay? Or we can say get user chats, get user chats, and then we will be finding a certain chat. So right here we will say find chat. So let's go ahead and start with the create chat right here. So the first thing, we need to bring in our model. So let's import it. So at the very top, I can say const chat model will be equal to require, and we bring it from our models. So stroke models and then a stroke chat model. Now we can use these right here. So let's create a function and I'll call it create chat. Will be equal to async. Now when creating the chat, we will be having two things in our request here. Our request body, we will be having both IDs, that is a sender ID and a receiver ID. They don't have to be in any order, so we can just call them the first and the second ID. So they are not like organized. We don't know who is sending, who is not sending. So right here we extract those two IDs from the body. So I can say const I extract first ID and also second ID. So these are the IDs of the two users who are having a conversation. So right here I get them from request.body. Okay, cool. Now we can use these two IDs first to find if a chat already exists. Okay, so right here let's wrap everything with try and catch block first of all. So right here you can say try and catch, and then for catch we will be having the error. Okay, it's good to log the error to the console here, so I can say console.log of error. And also we send this message to the front end, so you can say res.status. We include 500, meaning that it's a server error, and then .json. We send our error like that. Now in our try, we perform a check, or we find if we already have a chat that is created with these two parameters, the first ID and the second ID. So right here we will say const chat will be equal to await. Right here we say our chat model, and we use the .find1 method. So find1, we invoke these, and now we should pass some value here for us to filter. So we will use the field which is only one, which is our members right here. So let's say members, and we will check if members has the two of the IDs here. So right here we will use a MongoDB operator called all. So right here I'll say all, and I use full colon. I pass an array here, and I want to make sure that members contain both the first ID and the second ID, not just one, but both. Okay, so right here I pass the two of them like that. Okay, and if we get a chat back, if we get a document back, that means that we have a chat already existing with these two members, so we don't need to create a new one. So what we can do right here, we can just return this existing chat to the front end. So we will say if this chat already exists, let us just return it. So we will return res.status, and we will use 200, meaning no error, and we will say .json, and we pass our chart right here. Okay, I hope this makes sense. So if the chart already exists, we don't need to create a new one. We just send the one that already exists. Okay, cool. Now if this chart does not exist, we will go ahead and create a new document using our model. So right here we will say const a new chart will be equal to new model. So new chart model, and then we invoke these and pass the values that our new chart here should contain, and it should contain our members array. So right here we pass our members, and this should be an array of these IDs. So I pass the first ID and the second ID into our members. Okay, and yeah, so our chart is only having the IDs of those two users who are having a conversation. Okay, now the next thing that we do is to save this chart to the database and send it to the front end. So right here we will say const, let's say response, and we will await our response. So I'll say await, and we use this new chart object right here. So I say new chart, and then it have a method called save. So we are saving it to the database, and we are also getting that document back, which is now saved in the DB. And then after getting this document, we can say res dot status, and then this will be 200, and then dot JSON, and whatever we send is our response, and I save. Okay, so yeah, this is it. This is how we can create a chart. So this is for create chart. Let's come down here, and we get one for get user charts. So right here we will create another one, and we will say const find user charts. Since we will be using the find method, so saying find makes more sense. So right here I can also change this one. Now this will be a function, so async, then we will be able to use request and then response. So when finding the user charts, we will be passing the user ID of the currently logged in user through the URL parameter. So right here we will extract our user ID. So right here user ID will be equal to, and we will get this from request.params and then dot user ID. Okay, and now we can make use of this user ID to filter all the charts for this particular user. We can use the try and catch block. So I'll just copy this one for the error. We log the error and also we send an error. But for try, let's do this. So right here I'll say const. Now here we will be having an array of charts. So const charts will be equal to, we await, and we make use of our chart model. So I'll say chart model dot find, and we pass a filter here. So now right here we will pass members, which is our field, again like we did here, members. So I'll say members. Now the only difference is that here we were using this operator or, meaning that we must have these and these, but right here we don't want both. We just want to have one. If that ID exists in any of the members, then let's return that chart. Okay, so right here I'll pass an object and I'll use in. So this operator called in, it's a MongoDB operator, and we pass an array and we will say user ID. and we send now these charts to the front end. So right here we include a response. So let me copy this one and I'll paste it here, and here instead of response we say charts, like that. Okay, and I'll go ahead and save. Now we have two controllers: find user charts, create chart. Now let's create this final one, find chart. Find chart is also pretty easy and actually so similar to this one. And what I can do, I can actually just copy this one. Okay, it will be similar but a bit different. So let's paste it here. Let's say find chart. So we will be having just one chart, okay, not multiple. Then async request response. So now right here from our params, we will be getting both the first ID and the second ID. So right here we can have a first ID of the two users who are having a conversation. So first ID, and we will also be having a second ID. So what we can do in such a case, we can just remove this. Then right here we can extract first ID from the params, and also we can extract the second ID. Okay, now we will use these two to get a single chart. So we will do the same thing that we did here. So we will pass members, then we will use all parameter. We will pass our first ID and our second ID. So right here, instead of using in, we will use all. So we want a chart that is having both of them, okay? Not just one. Both of them must be there. And they must be equal to whatever ID we are passing, okay? So all. Then we will get a single chart. And all we will do is to send this chart to the front end. So we will do that way. Then in case of an error, we catch the error. Okay, cool. We have all the controllers here. Remember, they are just controllers. So we should go ahead and also create the routes. So right here, let's add a new file. And now this one will be our chart route. Okay, before we create the route, remember we should export our controllers. So let's first export them down here. So right here we'll say module and then dot export, and we set this to be equal to create chart. So we are exporting the create chart, we are exporting user chart. Okay, find user charts and find right here chart. Cool. So we are exporting them. Let's go to now our routes. Let's add a new file here. And now we will be having our chart route .js. Now in here we will import Express so that we can use Express to create our router. So let's bring in Express. So this will be equal to require Express, and right here we can say const router will be equal to Express and then dot router. Now we can use this router to create our routes. So right here we can say router dot post. So when creating a chart, we will be making a post request. Let this be the root here, create chart. I click now on this one to import that controller. There we go. Cool. Okay, now we will be having another one. Let's just duplicate these 2 times. Now these two will be get requests. So right here we say get. Now for find user charts, we will be passing a single parameter and we will call it user ID. And then now right here we can just call our find user charts. We click on it Then right here, we will be passing two parameters. So right here, I can add find here, and just to differentiate it a bit from this, and right here we can say first ID. This will be the first parameter. Then we will also be having another one, and we will say second ID. And here we will be getting a single chart using those two IDs. So we find our chart. Now all that remains is to export this router. So module dot exports, and we say router. I save. Okay, cool. Now we just need to bring in this router, which is our chat router, into our root application, which is index.js. So let's import that. Instead now of user router here, I'll change this to chat. So I'll use Control-D to select even this part and say chat. And then now we can use it as a middleware here as app.use, and we'll have a stroke API. Then we can have a stroke chat. Then at the very end, we use a comma and we pass our chat route. And amazingly, we have created the 3 API endpoints, which is awesome. Now, the only thing that we can do is to actually test if it's working. So here we can say chats instead of chat. So what we can do is to go into the server here, cd server, and we start our server. So I'll use nodemon, and our server crashed, so something is wrong. So in our chat route, we should have called this router. So I think this is what's causing the issue. And then another thing that I have noticed in our chat controller, right here we just used find, but we want one chat. So you can use find one to get back an object. If you use just find, you might get an array here. We want it to be just an object. So use find one and make sure that you are calling your router, and now it's working. Cool. Now let's test our routes on Postman. So I'll open Postman, and at Postman, I'll go ahead and add a new request here. It will be a post request, and I'll use this URL here, http localhost 5000 stroke API stroke chats. Then we need to have a body. Body we select raw, then JSON. And right here, we will pass the body of the request, which is an object. We will be having the first ID and the second ID. So at our body, we should be having first ID and second ID. So this is what we include there. So let's go ahead and have our first ID, and this will be a string. So let's go to the database and grab the IDs from there. So right here we have charts, but it has nothing. So if we check it, it doesn't have anything, but we can grab our users from here and be able to create a chart. So let's say we were having a conversation between this user, Chaoo here. So I go back to Postman, that will be the first ID. And we will be having a second ID. And we grab the other ID again from the database. So, and we were having a conversation with John right here. So I will copy that and I'll open Postman, paste it here. And let's create a chart. So when we create a chart, we should be having the members, chart ID, timestamps, and so on. So I'll send. Let's see what happens. And there we go. So now we have created a chart. We have our members, we have the ID of the chat, then we have the timestamps, which is awesome. So that route is working. Now when we get to creating messages, we will be getting a particular chat ID, and also we will be having a sender ID together with the message. So yeah, when we open a chat, we will be able to receive this ID in order for us to send the messages. Okay, so that is how they will be able to work together. Now this was for the post. Now let's try to get a certain user chats. So right here we will be making a request to this URL again, right here. But now the cool thing is that we can now pass the parameter or the ID of a certain user. So let's pass the ID of John right here, like that. Okay, I stopped copying it. Let's just select one of the members here and pass it as right here. After chats, we pass this ID, and this will be selected as the parameter. We send, and we should get a chat back. So send, and there we go. We get this chat, and these are like all the chats for this particular user. Okay. Now you can see we are getting in an array. So if we had multiple chats, they will be listed in here. Now we want to find a single chat given the first ID and the second ID. So this is the first ID. Now let's get the second ID here. So I copy this one and pass it here. So from our URL, we'll be able to pick these as a first ID and second ID. And also we should add something here. I have remembered we should add find. Okay. So that is this route right here. This one, find, then first ID, second ID. So let's make the request and see if we get back an object. Now this should not be an array. So send, and there we go. We get an object, which is a single chat. So the three routes are working. Now in the next video, whatever we will do, we will create our API routes for the messages, and I'll see you in the next one. And by the way, if you are enjoying this and you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do so. Subscribe, turn on post notification, and yeah, I'll be really happy for that.